the SEC, they're not good at playing defense, and they're not going to want a trial, and they're not going to want this in front of a jury. So if that result happens, then you would think there would be a settlement.
In today's video, Attorney John Deaton discussed the latest with the SEC Ripple XRP lawsuit, the recent summary judgments from Ripple and the SEC, and what's next for the procedural process, likelihood of a settlement soon.
There's such an anticipation. Everyone's expecting a smoking gun or some bombshell. And no, everything was just confirmed about that there were conflicts of interest, backroom dealings, things of that nature. You had SEC personnel saying maybe you shouldn't give ETH, say that comment about ETH.
Right.
You had SEC personnel saying this speech is going to cause greater confusion in an already confused market. So you had all this going back and forth. It's relevant to the fair notice issue in the Ripple case, but not the case itself. So, for example, probably the most disappointing thing for XRP holders, and because we're on watch for the verdict, I'm prepared with my shirt here, right? Because that decision could come down any day. And for XRP holders, I think they were hoping that there would be a discussion about, well, if you're giving ETH a pass, why not XRP?
Exactly.
XRP is just decentralized. There was going to be give and take about that. And there was none of that. And so that was probably where I think people like yourself and others were thinking, well, that's not there. So it's not going to affect the judge's decision on whether Ripple sold XRP in a manner that violated the securities law. But if she finds Ripple did violate the securities law, and she allows a jury to hear this fair notice issue, that there was so much confusion in the market, Ripple wouldn't have fair notice to know that it's not a security, then those emails become a big deal because the jury gets to hear all of that confusion, back and forth, backroom dealings, conflicts of interest. Arguably Hinman lied because when he was deposed, the emails were not out and he didn't think they would be out. And the lawyer at the SEC instructed him not to answer questions based on privilege that the judge overruled. So he's asked a question of, did you talk to anyone else other than the SEC about the substance of your speech? And he said no. But we know in an email on June 4th, he said, hey, I'm speaking to Vitalik next week to get a fuller understanding of the Ethereum network. So that implies that he did speak to people at ETH about ETH to confirm, that it's sufficiently decentralized and all of that. And so that's where we stand.
With that being the case, likelihood, it feels like at this time, this is probably going to go to trial. And I didn't think that this would go to trial. I felt like this would most likely get settled or at some case get some sort of ruling that would at least put Ripple in a better position. What are your thoughts now that we've seen this of the Ripple case actually going to trial?
Yeah, I think the chances of a trial increased. Before we learned, and just remember, Paul, for your audience, it wasn't just the Hinman emails that were unsealed, but it was the underlying evidence, that summary judgment evidence that both sides presented. And so before this all was unsealed, I always said, and you can go back and watch my crypto law videos, that people are underestimating the chances of a jury trial. And I think that for your audience to know, a jury gets involved when a judge says that there are disputed facts that need to be determined. A judge decides the law. Now, when the facts are not in dispute, or there's enough facts not in dispute that she can apply the law and grant summary judgment, she will. But if she says, for example, there are a genuine issue of fact or whether or not XRP holders were relying on the efforts of Ripple, or that XRP was acquired for non-investment reasons, or common enterprise, or any of those types of issues, then yes, it would go to a jury. Now, If she allows the fair notice defense, then it does go to a jury, because Ripple did not move for summary judgment on fair notice. They stated to her that's a question for the jury. So, the best, in many ways, a great result for Ripple would be, the obvious best result is they win outright, right?
Yeah.
And most people don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think the SEC is going to win outright. And so if the judge says, Ripple, in 2014 or 15 or 16, when you did these things, you offered XRP as an unregistered security. And she finds that, but I'm going to allow you to argue that you didn't have adequate notice because of market confusion. Then we have a jury trial for sure. And so I think the jury trial chances have increased at least 50% from where I was before. So I think, but here's the thing. The SEC, they're not good at playing defense, and they're not going to want a trial, and they're not going to want this in front of a jury. So if that result happens, then you would think there would be a settlement.
Yeah.
Right, because it's okay. Let's just strike a deal and move on. I know a lot of people feel the way that you probably feel, Paul, which is, Brad, Mr. Garlinghouse. All right, I don't know if I was shocked, right? Because that's he said we'd be shocked. But you got to take it from his perspective, Paul. He was sued individually for an allegation that he was so reckless in not knowing XRP was a security in 2015, when in 2018, the SEC couldn't make up their mind. Hinman's ignoring everyone, intentionally prosecuting Ripple, that it shocks him. You know what I mean? So we got to put it all in our own perspective.
What are your thoughts on Hester Pierce's comments there?
Yeah. I understand what Hester is saying, but she's got to look at it from the total picture. No one's saying that you should discourage anyone, the directors or commissioners, from going out. But they put this speech on the website, and Hester Peirce, Robert Jackson, Jay Clayton, these were all fellow commissioners, pointed to that speech as guidance. The problem was, when we get into the trial and the litigation, the SEC took the position that it wasn't market guidance, and that it wasn't meant to be market guidance because it was his personal opinion. What I would say to Hester is, say, that's fine. What you said is fine, but don't pretend that it's not accepted from the market as market guidance. And did you know that the emails showed, the Hinman deposition that I read, it showed that there were people calling it the Hinman test in the market, right? It was the Hinman sufficiently decentralized test, no longer the Howey test. And so that's how powerful that speech was given to the market. And so I don't have a bone to pick with Hester. I have it with the enforcement lawyers who are trying to pretend, it wasn't market guidance. It's nothing to do with the SEC. That's silly.
And in many places, people could look at that and say, hey, Gensler's now the SEC chair. Oh my gosh, we're going to see an explosion over here because he is pro-blockchain. And in fact, he is the opposite. So many people would look at that and say kind of the same thing.
Yeah, and if you ever get to interview Hester, you could ask her, the problem is, in the Coinbase writ of mandamus that they're seeking, the SEC literally took the position that Gary Gensler's statements are irrelevant.
Yeah.
That's the silliness of it all.
What is your thoughts on where, I know you and Mark differ, but have, good conversations. What are your thoughts on how his position lines up here?
Well, one thing that surprised me is he said that the SEC should win. That didn't surprise me coming from him. He's a former SEC lawyer, even though and he goes against him as well. I want to share that. But he ultimately said that he thought that the SEC would probably lose with this judge. That surprised me. As far as coming out any day now, that's what I was saying. I'm wearing this shirt because I knew I was coming on your show, and the ruling could come out while we're talking. And so,
and just to be clear on the ruling, Just for our audience, just to be clear on the ruling, what we're talking about coming out is possibly a summary judgment, correct?
Right. Judge Torres's decision on, does the SEC get summary judgment, or Ripple get summary judgment, or does she grant partial summary judgment?
Right.
Does it go to a jury trial? That's really the decision that we're talking about, that could be coming out any day now. But I agree with Mark Fago when he talks about the complexity of the case. Paul, I know there's a lot of people frustrated at how long it's taking, but look at how big this case and its ruling becomes as each day progresses.
For sure.
Imagine
even more so now.
Absolutely. If the SEC wins outright, Gary Gensler will make this the biggest thing that's ever happened at the SEC. He'll say it validates his regulation by enforcement, all the crypto tokens or securities. It'll be a big deal. If Ripple wins and the judge sides for XRP is not a security, it's a commodity, et cetera, a currency, then that's going to cause a lot of the industry to bolden, right? And become more, okay, we can beat the SEC, we can defeat them. And it'll cause the political momentum to lose a lot of steam. And so I don't blame the judge. She knows how big of a decision this is.